Hogstye.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Hogstye. It's your host Alex Zeese here. I got Jamal, I got Steve. If I sound a little off, I've had COVID all week, so I did lose my voice and have a sore throat through most of it. So I might sound a little, raspy.
We're the walking wounded here because, I wrote a column about it. I was in the hospital and for a couple days
Right.
and all of that. And this is week 2 of eating 100% healthy. And here's the rule. I figured out the rule. It's really actually pretty easy. Mm-hmm. If it tastes good, don't eat it.
Yes.
If it tastes bad, eat it.
Yeah.
That's the simple line. Nothing that tastes good is healthy for you. Not one thing.
Nope.
So.
Nope. Hey, look.
Unless you really have a thing for
there.
piles of vegetables, which I don't, but so that's basically the rule. You can never eat anything that tastes good.
Yeah. I've been doing that myself a lot. Kale is just awful. It tastes awful. It's awful texture, but it's the healthiest thing in the world apparently to eat. So
see, I can't do it. I'm sorry, I just can't.
Jamal,
I'm about to say it's tricky, man.
what about you? What are you eating these days?
Yesterday I was at a wedding last night, and like some of the hand foods, and I ate everything, and I typically don't even do that. They had the beef there, they had salmon, they had cake. I mean, obviously, right, cake.
Sure.
Like the hand foods was like crab cake and some fried foods, like some fried pastry type of food and stuff like that. I heard of
Puff pastry, yeah.
What's this thing called? Beef Wellington. That was my first time ever having beef Wellington. I was like, oh my god, what am I doing here? So
that's a pretty highbrow dish.
Yeah. So when you're asking me what am I eating these days, I'll just give you a glimpse into yesterday. That was different.
Steve, he's eating all the stuff you and I are not supposed to eat anymore.
Yeah.
Look,
yeah.
I
again, I mean, it's a real simple rule. If it tastes good, don't eat it.
I got one more wedding,
bad, eat it.
and that's next week, and that one is going to be interesting too because that's in Arkansas, so we have a 2-day event, so we're going to see what the food's talking about out there too.
All right.
Well, I'm sorry you have to go to Arkansas.
Hey man, first time, so we'll see.
Yeah.
I've been in Arkansas a lot, and it's I don't know. Yeah. It's a bit bad.
I still don't understand why it's not called Arkansas because it's clearly the word Kansas with an AR in front of it. But
you got to understand, down here in the South, there's a lot of words like that. Like there's a town in Texas that the locals call Buda, B-U-D-A. I call it Butta just to irritate everybody and just to tick off the locals.
Is it like a little Jewish town? It's like Butta.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's probably German.
Oh, I will say, since I brought it up myself, happy Passover to my fellow Jews out there because it's Passover.
Oh, is it Passover?
Yep, it's Passover.
And for the Christians out there, happy Easter. By the time you hear this, it'll be past, but I hope you had a happy Easter.
Right. Yeah. So I was pondering eating some gefilte fish on the air, but I didn't think that would translate well.
So I think the only thing that tastes good that you can eat is fish.
Yes, that's true. Like shrimp should still be pretty healthy. I know it's high cholesterol, but it's like the healthy cholesterol. Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to buy it plain.
Right.
And,
but you're not a big fish guy, right?
Well, I do love fish. It's just I don't cook, and so it's very difficult to do that. And I've got boys who aren't fish people at all.
Gotcha.
And so we don't ever do it.
Right,
but
gotcha.
I do like
all right.
fish.
Well, enough of the food stuff.
That's the food hour.
Yes. Why don't we get into the show? We have a couple things to talk about. We're going to start with our linebacker preview for the draft. It's our last one, right?
No, we've got quarterbacks.
Oh, we have quarterbacks?
Yeah, I saved that for the end.
I thought we had done quarterbacks already.
No.
Oh, well. All right.
We did free agent quarterbacks. We never did.
That's why I'm confused. All right.
Saving it for the big finale.
All right. So the penultimate thing, linebackers. Jamal, you took on linebackers. Why don't you take us through some of the names in the draft class and your thoughts on what Washington should do, where they should be targeting guys, that kind of stuff.
I mean, to be frank, so let's. I guess we'll go through some of the the more notable names in a sense. I don't have no
Right.
in-depth knowledge of all these linebackers, man. I've been looking at the receivers and quarterbacks for the most part, but
Right. Steve kind of hit you with this one last minute, I know.
Yeah, I know. It was. I appreciate Jamal doing it because it was supposed to be me, but that was last week, and I just needed a break.
It's all good. So I did what I could for the most part, just doing research more than anything else on these guys, and I'll just go through the order. I have about 5 names exactly, or maybe 6 that could make sense in either the first round or mid rounds if they happen to find a way to get like a 3rd round pick through a trade or something like that. Who knows? Or maybe even late 2nd. We'll see how that goes. But some trade back options to consider in the 1st round for Washington. If from 11 to, all right, so put it this way: Devin Lloyd and Nicolby Dean are 2 1st round prospects. And while both of them would be considered okay options at number 11, if you can maximize the value for these guys by making a trade back, let's say from 11 to anywhere in the teens, like 14 through 18, you can still have a good chance of getting Nicolby Dean or Devin Lloyd. Now, when it comes to other teams, I'm not too keen or knowledgeable on every single need that they'll have, like depending on who you trade back with. But there are some suitors who are obviously looking to trade up for some playmakers, whether it's a quarterback and Malik Willis is still there at 11, or cornerback, defensive lineman, who knows. So with that being said, let's get into the first one, Devin Lloyd. Devin Lloyd is 6'3", 235, ran a 4.66 40-yard dash out of Utah. He finished the 2021 season with 110 tackles, 8 sacks, 4 interceptions in 14 games and 13 starts. He is one who's coming off an All-American season, Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year, and first team All Pac-12 in 2021. So he's an option if you want to look at a Mike linebacker. And for Washington's sake, because of the route that they went, well, 2 things actually, now that I think about it as I'm talking. The Commanders love to, within recent weeks, they kind of love to put Cole Holcomb's name out there in terms of being a possible fit for the Mike linebacker, the middle linebacker position. And while I kind of don't buy it, I think it's convenient given the situation that they're in right now. Lloyd technically can be an outside or a Mike linebacker, but I think if you go the route of 1st round, you're not going to draft an outside linebacker in the 1st round with your 1st pick. So when you get a Lloyd or Nicolby Dean, what we'll get to in a second, he's a strong competitor in terms of his physicality, competing on every single down in one-on-one situations and things like that. For example, one of the things that he does well, according to the people out there, is taking on the lead blocks on power runs, and he has the strength to shed offensive linemen, so he's really good in the box in that regard against the run. And also as a blitzer, he's a Swiss Army knife in that regard. So if you do have that ability to use him from a off-ball standpoint, using him in blitzing, or if you want to use him on the edge, and I'm not comparing the 2 in terms of skill set. I mean, in terms of like same tier. But if you want to look at an ideal comparison in terms of what they can do for a defense, look at Micah Parsons in terms of him being able to be off ball or having to be on the edge and rush the passer in that regard. So that's kind of what you can envision from a Devin Lloyd, is being able to play in 2 different spots on the field. But the concerns around him is keying and coverage, but also play recognition as well. He's kind of late in processing things. So in the run, in the run specifically, sometimes they say something about his blocking schemes. Blocking schemes, being able to identify those a little bit quicker and knowing where the pullers are or knowing where the run is scheduled to go. He's kind of late in processing that. And then some technical issues in pass coverage, which is just simply moving fluidly when identifying routes and stuff like that. So that's kind of the half analysis on Devin Lloyd. But, I mean, ultimately, competitor, he's one of the top prospects in the draft, if not the number 1 linebacker on the board this year.
You know what's good about him? He's got a traditional size for a middle linebacker.
Yeah.
You know, so much of these linebackers, especially some of the ones on Washington's roster, have been undersized guys, short, not bulky. Personally, I like you, Jamal. I'm not buying the Cole Holcomb thing. I think they had to throw something out there because everybody knows they don't have a middle linebacker on the roster.
Right.
Starting quality, at least. And so here you go, Cole Holcomb. But, of course, that would leave him with a spot on the starting strong side if they do that. So I like Devin Lloyd's size, but the last thing you said bothers me a lot. Slow processing, scheme pickup, that kind of thing bothers me.
Especially a middle linebacker. That's got to be a guy who processes quickly.
Yeah.
But I think the good thing about that, like the counterpoint, because what Steve and Alex, what y'all are saying is true. I think the good thing about it is, the learning doesn't stop at the college level. So like he has the skill set right now, and I think one of the things that can help him is because he's good at what he does in terms of just the natural feel for the position. If you can kind of learn and like film study and work with your position coaches. Like if you can do that 24/7 as you get into the league, your learning curve can be a little bit quicker on the pro level, especially with all of the schemes that people are running nowadays. And when you trust what you see, you play a little bit faster. So while I agree it is a concern, like everybody has a concern or a knock heading into the league. It's about how you work to develop it. And we'll come across some other players in the linebacker position. It's kind of similar. It's all about what they do on the next level, but these are some talented prospects. I agree with you all. These are some concerns, but kind of can get tweaked, but we'll see how it goes moving forward.
Well, maybe like you wrote in the piece that he's a trade back. I mean, maybe he's not an appropriate candidate at 11, but trade back to 20-something, maybe he would be a consideration.
Yeah. All right, so next.
Yeah, there's a lot of defensive guys who fit that build, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Nicolby Dean out of Georgia. He's a 5'11 prospect, 229 pounds. Dean finished the 2021 season with 72 tackles, 13 and a half TFLs, tackle for losses, 6 sacks, 8 passes defended, and 2 interceptions in 15 games played. And he also had 15 starts for the Georgia Bulldogs. So that kind of tells you his importance to that defense. He kind of came on the scene. Let me put it this way. For the casual viewers, he kind of came on the scene late in the season. Mainly the SEC, the championship game, and obviously the playoffs as well. But he's been around for some time now. Dean is a highly athletic player that people are saying can become a true like 3-down linebacker in today's game. So you're looking at a person who doesn't come off the field at all, similar to Cole Holcomb, which though Holcomb was out of necessity, it wasn't because he was a great player, but Dean is the person who can be viewed coming into the league as a 3-down linebacker, given his competitive and explosiveness. Just athletic ability is what they're banking on in terms of that regard. But also he's physical in the box, and that's kind of another thing. Like when you're that small for your position, you have to pack a punch, and Dean does that. Okay, so. So I'm reading some notes from Nicolby Dean that I wrote, and I realized that I put Lloyd in one of his name in one of my notes for Dean, but that's just a simple typo, fellas. But anyway, he's physical he's physical in the box and forceful upon contact. So like he kind of knows his run fits essentially. He knows where the ball is flowing as well, similar to Devin Lloyd, but also and somewhat similar to Devin Lloyd, right? But I think one of the things that helps Dean is being able to blitz and cover. So he has the athleticism to cover, but he also has the know-it-all in terms of pattern matching, recognizing where routes are likely going, essentially being smart and understanding offensive concepts to some degree. I don't know like the level of which, like if it's very good or elite from a prospect standpoint, but coming into the league, he understands pattern matching, and it can help him when he's doing his zone depths, his zone drops, what's coming his way, what's breaking out, being able to communicate with who is it, slot defenders, slot corners, or even the safeties to some degree, letting them know what may be coming their way, or even just communicate with the defensive line in terms of watching out for whichever side they're running the ball, or maybe even if a screen is coming their way or something. I don't know, but that's kind of helpful to his whatever defense I guess selects him. So with that being said, the concerns, like we mentioned, his size, right? You have to pack a punch, but he also can be swallowed up pretty easily by offensive linemen. And I think the concern specifically is because of the defensive line that he played with. He was pretty clean. He really didn't face many issues in terms of having to work in traffic a lot. So when linemen are able to climb to the second level of a defense, how is Dean going to be able to respond and react to an offensive lineman barreling down to him in a zone run scheme or a power run where you have to take on that backer? I mean that offensive lineman, that offensive guard, and stuff like that. So you kind of hope he doesn't get swallowed up from that standpoint. And yeah, I think that's one of the main things is he good enough to take contact from a 3-down standpoint, from a professional standpoint against these offensive linemen, and is he able to get around them, not by vacating his gap, but by taking him on and occupying an offensive lineman, given, that's probably going to happen all the time. They're going to run his way all the time and test his mental capacity and his mental toughness and things like that, and seeing if he can take these things on throughout an entire length of a game. So that's kind of the concern with the Kobe thing.
To me, well, first of all, Dean is supposedly blazing fast. He supposedly runs in a 4.4 time. I don't really think he's what Washington needs, to be honest. It seems like has some of the similar skill sets to Jamin Davis, the speed, the athleticism, the ability to cover. But that's not really what Washington needs. I mean, they need a middle linebacker, and I don't know if this guy is a middle linebacker.
I mean,
so I don't know if he's what the team should draft.
He's also at that weird tweener size where you're kind of talking what Landon Collins was doing, where he's kind of between being a strong safety and a linebacker at 5'11" and 220. What is he? 229 is what you have listed.
229, yeah.
Don't we still have? I know they got rid of Collins, but don't they still have?
I think we have 18 of those.
Yeah,
guys
they have
on
a
the
bunch
roster.
of guys who kind of are that tweener safety cobra thing, whatever you want to call it, Buffalo or whatever they're calling it now. But like you said, he is a fun talent. At the college level, all he does is just run down guys.
I mean, yeah, but the size, the non-traditional size and skill set makes me nervous in terms of a pick for the Redskins.
Yeah. All right. So why don't we move on to the Wyoming prospect you got there, Chad Mumba?
Yeah.
Or Mumma? Mumma? What do you call him?
Mamba.
Before I heard that, I was going to chime in. Sorry. With Dean.
Yeah.
It's weird, man. When you see 5'11", you kind of get concerned, like especially with certain positions. You just kind of get concerned with those type of things. Like, There's no doubt that he was an effective player at the college level, but if you see him as a true 3-down linebacker, like it reminds me of London Fletcher, if that makes sense. Like just in terms of his size, like you have to be elite at something. And London was an elite processor. Like he was quick to diagnose. He was all over plays. Like he was there from the jump. So sometimes, he matter of fact, he was a rocket. Like he went at the lineman. Like that didn't scare him. So, and I'm not saying it scares Dean, but I just think the concern is legitimate because when you lack the size, you have to be elite at something, especially at that position. So, and also reminds
London
me
was
of
even shorter than that.
Marley too. Nico Marley, I think. He was making a name of himself in preseason, but it also had a lot to do with his last name. But at the end of the day, you like 5'10", 5'9", and
well, yeah. That was the thing about Nico Marley's. He was barely 200 pounds soaking wet.
Yeah, he
You
was.
know, people forget that London Fletcher was very bulky. He was 5'10", but he was 240 pounds.
Yeah.
So he was shorter and wider than Dean.
I wouldn't have been surprised if those last couple of years Fletcher was over 250 too. Like he was just getting.
He might have been.
Yeah, he was getting bigger.
He was listed around 240.
Yeah.
So I mean, Dean is.
He's almost there,
leaner,
229. So
taller,
I mean, so the good.
10 pounds
the good
and
thing,
an inch.
The good thing for Dean is he can gain the weight, but yeah, like London Fletcher was 240 something like that. So he still has some work to do, and maybe if he gets his strength up a little bit, get some more size on him, maybe this becomes null and void. But yeah, that's the thing for him, and we've seen similar things in Washington already. So that's kind of the decent comparison.
And I look at all these guys that you have listed, Jamal. They're all pretty small.
Yeah,
quite
the
honestly.
one that we're coming up on right now is probably, in terms of size-wise, he's probably the best linebacker for his size and probably his athleticism too.
Prototypical size.
Yeah, prototypical size. So
yeah.
Here we go. Chad Muma, Wyoming, 6'2", 239, ran a 4.63 40. He finished the season with 142 tackles, 8 TFLs, 1.5 sacks, 3 passes defended, and 3 interceptions in 13 starts, 13 games. So I think what people are viewing out of him, and it's kind of weird. Like I said, when we started this, I had to do research. I wasn't able to watch outside of, actually during the season, but I wasn't able to watch these guys intensively doing the linebacker thing. So what's weird when I say what I'm about to say is that a lot of people see Muma getting drafted in like the second, third round because of his pre-draft route workouts and the whole process in itself. Like he's building a name for himself. He's becoming a better prospect in that regard. But he's being viewed as a developmental player from some scouts who write their scouting reports and maybe a day 2 or day 3 option for a team. So the developmental aspect is kind of where I feel like it's not alarming. It's just surprising from my standpoint, given the words behind Muma in the pre-draft process. So Muma is, with his speed, is pretty good, but he's a technical linebacker. So he's the one who processes well, but has above average linebacker athleticism in terms of being able to do everything well. Like he's just above average, which is also good enough to be a down to down linebacker in the NFL. But he's like he gets the technique right. He uses his pads well. He's processing well. He has good processing in the zone. Obviously, like I said, pad level in the box, which is really good because if you're taking the wrong angles, if you're too high or too low, you're not going to be effective in the box. You're not going to be really good. And in terms of just being able to maintain blockers or maintain a tackle or anything like that, you'll become a liability. I think one of the things that concerns scouts is his play strength, though. So while he's technical and he plays with pad level, he doesn't pack that punch that we talked about with like Nicolby Dean. Like he lacks the physicality. So there's a chance, like, just because he has the size and stuff like that, he can get swallowed up by linemen too. And that's kind of the concern for Chad Muma is, does he have the play strength to continue playing well on the next level? And this is kind of similar to Cole Holcomb when he came in. A lot of people were amazed by his athleticism, but at the same time, he didn't even maintain his run gaps. He was running out of gaps to avoid linemen, and when he did take on contact with linemen, he got driven off the ball. So that's kind of where Muma is in terms of coming into the league. Is he lacks the desired physicality when taking on blockers, but in terms of one-on-one at the point of attack with ball carriers, he's okay. And he's able to, maintain that technique and things like that, as well as in the pass coverage. But if you don't have that physicality, that's kind of where the concerns start with Muma.
I think we have officially run out of starting prospects for Washington to be found in the draft, because you never know. I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe somebody outplays their draft status. But,
right.
it really strikes me as, like you said, Jamal, a developmental player. Maybe he comes along around, maybe he doesn't. Who knows? Third, fourth round pick, maybe something like that. I don't think he's, unless you come like Cam Curl come out of nowhere. I don't think this solves their middle linebacker problem.
Yeah.
No.
It's weird, man. It's weird. I wish I.
This team is weirdly non-concerned about the fact that they don't have a middle linebacker. It doesn't seem to bother them at all.
Well, it's not even that. It's that they're not concerned that, like, when John Bostic went down last year, they basically had 2 linebackers for the entire season.
Yeah, no, so what?
Yeah. They played 2 linebackers or less 90% of the time last season.
That's not ideal,
No.
though.
No.
I mean, goodness.
No, they're doing it because they had to.
Yeah.
Yeah, fellas, it's weird, man, because like they put themselves in this position, and I mean, it's weird in the sense that they transitioned to Cole Holcomb, but also they said that they need a veteran presence at the middle linebacker position, and then we're over here talking about middle linebacker options that truly they may really consider because it's a need. Like, you don't know who you have in middle linebacker, and I think one of the things that ultimately begs the question is, if you went into the 2022 season with the same people that you won 7 games with, I don't know how much better you really think you are. Like, are you that confident in your roster that it was just that bad of a season in terms of injuries and COVID and stuff like that? I don't know. Like, you won 7 games with this roster. Not much has changed. You only brought in 2 outside forces. One was a backup. External free agents. I say outside forces, but 2 external factors and free agents, and one was a backup edge rusher, and the other one was a starting guard that replaced a starting guard. So I don't know. I don't know, fellas. I'm with you all. It's a weird position to be in.
I my view about the linebackers, and I know we still have a couple more to get to here, but just in general, they do need to get somebody fairly high who you can develop and you can rotate in there as a third linebacker. I'm willing to accept you're not going to find a middle linebacker unless you draft one of those top 2 guys who are like first round.
Even then, one of them isn't a middle linebacker.
Yeah, I mean that's
You're
true.
really only talking about Devin Lloyd.
Yeah,
basically.
So maybe your plan is, all right, Cole Holcomb's just getting it by default for now, and this guy. You draft a guy first, second round, and he's going to be your third guy,
And listen, I mean, there's a bunch of linebackers. I mean, Jamal can't preview them all. There's hundreds of them, out there. And maybe they have their eye on somebody we don't know about it. There have been a lot of linebackers that have come out of absolute nowhere, undrafted free agents. London Fletcher was famously an undrafted
Washington
free agent
had good
himself.
luck at that, too. Antonio Pierce going back a little way.
Yeah, there's another one, Antonio Pierce. So this is not the entire universe here, certainly. So just remember that. But it sure seems like they've disregarded this position for 2 years now. And I mean, I don't know how anybody could say Jamin Davis' draft was not a bust.
Oh, yeah.
Considering, where they drafted him, what his skill set ended up being. That's not to say he can't have a successful NFL career, but as a draft pick, he's a bust.
Run fast and hit people. That's like, you just need people who can do that.
Yeah, but a middle linebacker needs to have the mental.
Oh, yeah.
That's what London Fletcher was really good at, as one of you said earlier. I mean, he was all about that, and then he was aggressive, and he was bulky enough to be able to sustain the pounding in the in the box. I don't know if they have anybody. I know they don't have anybody like that on.
Well, they don't have a field commander like London Fletcher. I mean, Fletcher, those last 2 seasons. Let's be honest, his on-the-field play was awful. He couldn't move anymore. But his ability to command the rest of the team and get everyone in the right position kind of made up for it quite a bit.
Yeah, it was pretty much if you could come within arm's length of him, he could hit you.
Right, but his legs did not move anymore.
Yeah, he was a statue. And if you would hit the statue, he would win.
All right, let's get these last 2 guys in, Jamal.
Yep. I'll be quick with these last 2. I'll just go in concession. I think succession. That's the word. Yep. See, I'm getting better with these things. All right. Christian Harris is the first person of these last 2. Out of Alabama, 6'2", 232, runs a 4.4 40. He finished the 2021 season with 79 tackles and 12 and a half tackles for losses, 5.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 3 passes defended in 15 games played, also with 15 starts. I think the important part of Christian Harris is noting that he started 3 consecutive seasons for Alabama. Excuse me. I don't know what that was. But he started 3 consecutive seasons with Alabama, and I think the important part behind that is obviously understanding who Alabama is and how great of a program it is. So that should be factored in terms of like who he is as a person, player, obviously character. He's a leader, but he also maintained very good production to hold that starting spot for 3 seasons. So with that being said, he is an athletic playmaking linebacker who, again, seen as a developmental player early on, but should be able to see the field situationally due to his athleticism and his competitive toughness. Defensive coordinators can use him in blitz packages that allow him to play in the box or at the line of scrimmage. And I think the important thing is just being a box player because he may be a coverage liability. So if you kind of ask him to play the hook coverages where he's dropping back in like the cover 2 situations or running with the seam receiver or something like that, who knows? Like he may be late in processing what he's seeing in that regard. Like if you can keep him in that box area where he's just utilized as a disruptor, I think is the biggest thing until he can learn to develop a little bit earlier. And a little bit later on with his processing and being able to be a more complete linebacker, being able to understand the zone responsibilities, being able to identify things a little bit quicker when he's dropping back in pass coverage. You can kind of trust him enough to be able to be a more complete player from a coverage standpoint, increase his snap count and snap percentage, become a more productive player in both aspects of the game. So we'll see, but his concerns is processing what he's seeing on the field as well. And
I mean, it sounds like he's probably an NFL strong side linebacker, although he's got some size. 6'2", 232 isn't tiny, so that's a good thing. But the slow processing thing, again, that's not to say it can't get better, it can't develop. That bothers me. Clearly, he came from a great program. The downside for taking players from programs like this sometimes is that their weaknesses are masked and covered up by all of the talent around them. And so that's always my fear with anybody from Alabama, Georgia, programs like that.
They're big fish in big pond.
Yeah, exactly. Or sometimes they're a little fish in a big pond, and they just stick out. But yeah, the fact that he's been a 3-year starter all that time does say something about him. But again, I don't think this may not be your middle linebacker of the future.
Maybe, man. Let's get to this last one.
Yeah.
Brian Asamoah, 6'2", 226, out of Oklahoma, ran a 4.56 40. He finished the 2021 season with 89 tackles, 4 TFLs, 1 sack and 2 forced fumbles in 12 games. Started 10 of those. He, again, is another athletic linebacker, but apparently has the excellent mental processing in the box. So he has the smarts, the awareness, being able to pick things up inside that small area of space. He can quickly diagnose run schemes and blow up blockers in the process. Another type of disruptor, while Harris is a guy who can disrupt in the pass game from blitz standpoints, and play well in the box. Asamoah is able to see things from a better standpoint, has the awareness and physicality to be a disruptor from the run standpoint, blowing up offensive linemen and being able to make plays from a tackling standpoint, and maybe as well as coverage as well. So this one, when you're asking him to, let me transition a little bit clearer. When I say like the run spot and processing, he's also able to cover well. So he's processing things a little bit quicker than Harris, but they're in the same boat in terms of projected draft status. So you're looking like second, third, maybe even fourth with these guys. But Asamoah is a little bit better in coverage, and he has the athleticism similar to Nicolby Dean. He has the pattern matching traits that people are looking for. So he's a little bit better from a more complete standpoint, unlike Christian Harris, who's athletic as well. But Asamoah is a little bit more complete. But I think one of the things that is knocking Asamoah is his patience and his tackling angles. So he's not the most technically sound defender, and that can get him in trouble because he's just out there, flying around, but he's not necessarily worried about the fundamentals of the game just yet. So he's an athletic guy. He processes well, but he's a liability because he can put himself out of position or just be too high at the point of attack, which ultimately leads to missed tackles, which ultimately leads to quite frankly, embarrassing yourself.
A LeVar Arrington style.
So that's kind of what that's what they're saying about Asamoah. So it's a give and take with these people who process well.
Yeah. Hey, what round do you see him getting projected in a lot? Out of curiosity.
I've seen.
Is he a second or a third rounder or day 3?
Okay. I've seen second and third.
Okay. I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know too much because I've seen mainly first rounders, but when I've looked at like 3 rounders and stuff like that, Asamoah has been in those mock drafts. So yeah, that's kind of where he's projected to be. I don't know exactly for Washington. I don't know exactly if that's like a best fit type of thing for Washington. Maybe if you're talking about the processing standpoint, he's quick. He'll obviously play quicker than Jamin Davis if they're saying he's a quick processor. But I don't know to what degree they view him as a potential fit for Washington. So we'll see. I don't know.
Washington just has so many guys like him already.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's all these linebackers. We have so many of all these guys.
That's what I'm saying. Every single one of them.
Yeah. And yet we only have 2 guys.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, they just got to go. If they choose linebacker, just speaking in the context of this prospect preview, you gotta find somebody who's a playmaker. Like you can't worry about a positional fit. I mean, Mike linebacker is important, but you got to find a playmaker because if Cole Holcomb and Jamin Davis are the guys you're going with into 2022, obviously with your backup, I forgot the guy that they re-signed, David Mayo. Like you just got to find a playmaker, somebody who's going to be on the field, disrupting to a degree. So again, similar to Micah Parsons. Like obviously he's a different tier, but he's a disruptor and he made plays. Like he made plays for that defense. Find somebody who could just make plays and then worry about the rest later if you're going to go linebacker, man. So I just don't. That's what the team is lacking overall is just the fact that somebody is not making. You need somebody out there that's making plays for your team, and that's just not the case on the defensive side of football.
Yeah, Holcomb can be the guy who just racks up tackles. Not like fancy plays, but just cleans everything up. Like I think he has that capability. He'll make a play or 2 every year, but you're right. They need somebody who can just be a disruptive factor. I think that's a good way to think of it. Steve, any final thoughts about linebacker before we move on?
No, I mean, I think I've said what I'm going to say here. I mean, they need an inside guy.
Yeah. I just don't see one coming out in this draft. Unless there's some 7th round unknown that we just don't.
Well, there probably is somewhere. I mean, it happens every year, so who knows?
Sure. All right, why don't we move on? And we got, of course, talk about we got 3 topics. We'll see if we can get to all 3 here. The first topic, the update as to the Dan Snyder scandal fest with Jason Friedman, and Congress is turning things over to I can't remember which agency now. All of a sudden, I didn't write
the FTC, Federal Trade
Commission. FTC, thank you. Yeah. The Federal Trade Commission. So Congress is done. They handed over some stuff to the Trade Commission, and we got word about what evidence Friedman supposedly turned over, which is interesting. The evidence, one, it was spreadsheets of fans who the team has never given security deposits back to. They're saying it's around $5 million worth of security deposits or something along those lines, where basically when you get season tickets, you put a security deposit down, so if you don't damage your seat, you're supposed to get it back. The team's been not giving it back to fans or making it very hard for fans to get it back over the last few years. And Friedman kept a spreadsheet with all those fans' information, including Roger Goodell, who was apparently a season ticket holder back in 2006, and he never got his security deposit back, was never told to get it back or anything. So that part's a little funny that you're directly screwing over Roger Goodell like that. And it's like $1,000 a fan or a seat or something like that.
That shouldn't surprise anybody. I mean, first of all, I'll reiterate the fact that it's a tragedy of government that the federal government is involved in a closely held private corporation. The FTC doesn't have any real jurisdiction over this. Congress doesn't have any jurisdiction over this. It's a waste, and it's a waste of congressional resources. And really, everybody ought to be frightened and scared that the federal government can do this to one little private company just because they feel like it. So that's just it's awful and terrible. One bad NFL owner is not worth the federal government doing this to private companies. This is called tyranny, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it is. But so that aside, that having been said, this Friedman stuff, I mean, it's a bunch of emails, some spreadsheets and stuff. I don't know if it's accurate or not. It certainly wouldn't surprise me if Washington did this. Right. There's been stories of Washington screwing over ticket holders and everybody else for years and years and years. So none of that should surprise me. That having been said, I didn't think it was the worst thing in the world in terms of team disaster. It's awful to screw customers, absolutely.
Right.
But is it like, John Gotti laundering money?
That one
Maybe
is not
that level.
The thing that becomes more money laundering is the second aspect of these accusations, which Freeman supported with emails he had received from Dan's right-hand man. Is it Chow?
Yes.
Who was, I guess, the head of the ticketing sales and all that kind of stuff for about 10 years. Those are the accusations of how the team, of course, was hiding money from the league, keeping it so that they didn't have to share revenue from by moving money from game days and actually putting it into concerts, college game sales, things along those lines. So what the team was doing was they would say that they're charging $44 for a ticket. They're actually charging $55 for a ticket, and they would take that extra $10 and say, "Oh no, this was a Kenny Chesney concert."
Yeah. First of all, somebody asked me? Was it you that asked me where the term money laundering came from?
Yeah, you and I were talking about
money
that.
laundering came from.
Oh, okay.
That show.
The Mafia.
No,
in the
that
20s.
show. What's the Ozarks?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where money laundering came from.
No, that's not where money laundering came from. Money laundering is a term. I looked this up. Money laundering is a term that was coined in the 20s and 30s when the Mafia owned a bunch of laundromats.
Oh, so it was laundromats. Okay.
Yes, that is where the term money laundering
Look,
came
it's
from.
that team.
And what the
it's
Washington
that people that came from Chicago down to Kansas. Missouri, because they wanted to launder money for the cartel. That's where laundering came from. You need to watch the show. That's what you got to do, Steve.
Oh God, I have watched the show. It's a great show. It's coming back.
I haven't seen the last season yet, but I love.
You need to catch up because the second half is coming out real soon.
Yeah, it's like in a couple weeks. So what Washington's doing isn't really money laundering. I mean, what money laundering basically is, they're taking illegal money and turning it into legal money, and that's not really what they're doing. But it was more fraud, more than money laundering, perhaps, because certainly those kind of accounting tricks, obviously, are not the right thing to do. That's not in accordance with GAAP principles, if you know what GAAP principles are, and you could argue that they are defrauding the other owners out of money. The
owners and technically the players, because that money would count towards the salary cap and things like that in the end.
Yes. So, but I wouldn't call it money. I'd call it just straight up old-fashioned
Good
fraud.
old-fashioned, I'm robbing my business associate's fraud. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we don't know what's true here, what's not true. I mean, Friedman looks to be a guy who had an agenda, to be fair. So, I mean, everybody wants to believe it because Dan Snyder's the Antichrist, as we all know. But I'm just not willing to. I haven't seen enough evidence to conclusively say that this is true and accurate. I haven't seen that yet. Wouldn't surprise me if it is, probably is, but I'm not willing to condemn the team just yet, just based on this.
If I were a betting man, would I bet they did it? Probably.
Probably, yeah, absolutely.
So the other interesting thing is, since the NFL's already had Mary Jo White looking into the sexual harassment thing, and she was a former SEC chair. We were talking about that before.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Steve didn't.
Yeah,
she's done a lot of things. So she's now going to be looking into all this as well on behalf of the NFL, and I'll be curious to see if there's a report about that. There was some information that came out that apparently at least one person told this stuff to Beth Wilkerson. Maybe not in this detail. It was because it wasn't Friedman.
Yeah.
But one of the people who interviewed with Beth Wilkerson said, hey, they're like hiding money and doing all sorts. Not a lot of detail given on what was told, but supposedly Wilkerson learned about this. I don't know if that was ever reported to the NFL initially. That would be interesting.
We don't know.
It was all verbal.
I mean, her
so
job.
Nobody knows exactly what was said. It wasn't no meeting notes or meeting thing. Like
Yeah.
So.
Just to reiterate, though, remember that Beth Wilkinson's job was not to investigate. No. Beth Wilkinson's job was to cover up and make something go away.
Sure.
You don't hire somebody like her to do an oral report, as Roger Goodell's sitting down for a gin and tonic, if you want to actually investigate something. This Mary Jo White lady, yes, it appears as though,
thing,
I guess the...
Okay, so I was going to say my thing with it, because I didn't want to like transition away too far from the subject, like the actual topic right now. But I think ultimately this new update is just an update. Like I have said that before. Like it's a continuance upon the report that we knew of 2 weeks ago. But in the end, I think you won't know anything further until you get a result from an actual confirmation or whether they're going to do it or not, like from the FTC. You won't know anything in that regard. And even still, like they have to do their due diligence, and you won't get that until a couple months from now, if not next year. And then you have to worry about all of these other aspects tied into these allegations and stuff like that ultimately may end up being nothing. Like you talked about, you Steve and you Alex, y'all talked about it previously in the conversation, just understanding everything involved, like the theories and stuff like that. I personally don't know exactly where this one leads to, because after hearing things for over a week now, the money part, it depends on his intent, and if you can prove ill intent versus like standard business practices that's common across the league or across major organizations and things like that. If you can prove negative intent, then maybe you have something there for Dan. But my thing, and this is where I wanted to get, and I want to say this because I don't want people hijacking it, because I've seen it already, and they got a bigger voice. My thing is, I don't know to what degree this impacts the stadium deal. I think we're in trouble, and because of the stuff that Dan Snyder has gotten into, the stuff that Dan Snyder is not able to get out of, and the things that the Washington Commanders are not able to get out of just yet, because there's investigations going on, never-ending investigations, new investigations popping up. And I don't know if any city, whether it's in Maryland or Virginia, wants to get tied to that right now. And if you're worried about a 2027 end of lease term for FedEx Field, they are in trouble, and it may be the case that they may have to extend the lease for a year or two, and because they're not able to get stadium deals done right now because of all of the mess that Snyder is in.
Well, yeah, and what we've seen is the state of Virginia and the state of Maryland have both sort of publicly backed off a little bit, especially Virginia. If you noticed, the Buffalo Bills got, I think it was $850 million from the state of New York.
And Tennessee just got a deal too.
Yeah, a huge deal
Yeah.
too. Right. Oh, non-controversial owners, with solid financials, better attendance. I do think. See, so much of politics is about public perception and image.
That's like
and so
90%
if
of
you take
politics. Yeah.
and so if you take a guy who's toxic like Snyder, I don't know if there's a lot of politicians who would want to be married to that, from a political standpoint. So that's a problem. And I think from the public perception part, the treatment of the women is probably worse than the finances.
Yeah.
Because listen, all politicians are corrupt. Joe Biden is very corrupt. His son belongs in prison. Every politician has some sleazy stuff in his past. But the treatment of women thing, I think, is a big deal, and I think that's in no small part why the state of Virginia has backed off. I think their offer was $350 million, I think, and
Maryland's around 400
that
or
helps.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, that helps, but that means it's a lot of private financing to go get, so it changes the deal dramatically. So I think Jamal's probably not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to go ask one of my corporate attorney friends who specializes in this, because I truly don't understand how the FTC has any jurisdiction whatsoever into this corporation. But I will have it come up with an answer before the next show.
And I got a question actually for you on this whole thing, Steve.
Okay.
So regarding the whole 2 sets of books that it sounds like there are, since you've dealt with these financial loans, the bank loans.
Oh yeah, tons.
I get that a lot of businesses actually do keep 2 sets of books, and that's perfectly legal at some level or another. It depends on, what they're doing with them, right? But if you're a financial institution who might be making a loan to the team or Dan Snyder, and you have these rumors about him having 2 sets of books and some hinky, that's got to factor into your loan process, right?
Well, there's very extensive underwriting that goes into these loans. It's not like you applying for a car loan, where they're going to check your credit rating, electronically and maybe have a conversation with you, and that's about it. It takes weeks, sometimes months, to do these kind of underwriting. There's teams of people that do this, and so especially obviously, if Dan Snyder have to borrow, $700-800 million.
Right.
That comes from a bunch of banks. That doesn't come from one bank ever.
Right.
And so that comes from a whole bunch of banks who all have this process. Yeah, that would be concerning. I think that would definitely be a concern. You got to think about this, though. So if it's a publicly traded company, then having 2 sets of books is automatically wrong.
Sure.
And it's probably a violation of federal law, because they have obligations to the shareholders. They have obligations to the federal government, like the FTC, the SEC. For this privately traded company, to some extent, they can keep whatever books they want, or not keep any books. Maybe just fly by night. Plenty of old, little sole proprietorships do this. But here, you got to think about who's harmed. Okay, so if all this is true, and we've already talked about that. If all this is true, the people who are harmed are the league, and arguably, as you said, the Players Association. You could see a lawsuit,
Right.
Or in this case, it'd probably be arbitration, because the NFL has arbitration clause for everything about this, and that's kind of when it comes out. And then you'd have to. And this is not my area of white collar crime. Is not my area of expertise at all. So, but the questions going through my head is there any sort of violation of either of Virginia and or Maryland state law with regard to finances?
Right.
That would be the next place that I would look, but I just, especially those states, I'm not licensed in those states, so I don't know. But that's the next question that's going through my head. And if so, who's at fault?
Right.
Is it the team? Is it the CFO? Who knows? So there's a lot left to be done on this.
And and someone actually corrected me on this. Technically, the way that it sounds like they're keeping both sets of books, it wouldn't impact your tax filing. It's not like one of these is hiding money from the IRS. It is kind of what it sounds like is.
That hasn't been alleged, at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, and by the way, I mean you could argue this is interstate commerce.
Right.
If they're sending money to New York, and so that could drag in, some banking
Right.
laws and
Right.
things. So that's the other thing. But in terms of the FTC jurisdiction, I'm gonna have to go find out because it's really bothering me. Why
Yeah, I've
anybody
actually,
thinks they have jurisdiction.
I know J.P. Finley and Brian Mitchell had an FTC guy on who said if there's anything, it's a minor fine.
Right. I just don't see it at all. And this is why, again, this is congressional tyranny, and they ought to be ashamed of themselves. We ought to vote all of them out of office.
Well, that's not going to happen because we gerrymander the hell out of everything. Thank you very much. Who was the Maryland governor? Jerry. That was his name. That's where it comes from.
Well, listen, gerrymandering has gone on by both parties in every jurisdiction for
Well, it's
decades
literally
and
named
decades
after
and
a
decades.
Massachusetts governor, actually, from like the 1700s.
I realize that, but
Yeah.
I mean, gerrymandering is simply the way
Yep.
it is.
And it's terrible. All right, so that's the update there on the whole investigation. Let's talk about something fun to wrap up the show. I don't think we'll get to the salary cap update, Steve. Why don't we save that
That's
for
fine.
next week? But you finally saw Winning Time. I've been telling you to watch it a bunch of times. Jamal, I know's been in on it.
Chris Larry was haranguing me on IJB about not having watched it last week.
So you're not all caught up, but you saw the first episode, which is the one we want to talk about because it's Redskins related, because it's all about Jack Kent Cooke. And there's a lot of Jack Kent Cooke being terribly portrayed in it.
They made him into the evil bastard supervillain in this.
Right? He's an old-timey supervillain is what he is in this.
Somebody had to be the bad guy
Right.
because the protagonist in the show is Dr. Jerry Buss, who's the
goofy,
famous
lovable
Laker owner.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it ultimately, as we all know, the history of the Lakers, it worked out, and he
Right.
did create a dynasty that exists today, or up until LeBron came in and ruined the team, of course. LeBron is a horrible human being.
We ain't doing that. He ain't no horrible human being. That don't even make sense.
Well, it's another show. I'll say
We're not talking about LeBron.
But so the point is, they portrayed Jack Kent Cooke as being just a terrible, terrible person in like every way.
Right. Yeah, which is very different from the Jack Kent Cooke we all kind of know as Redskins
Not really,
fans.
though. I mean, we loved him because he was our terrible bastard.
Right.
But, I mean, all these stories, what I hadn't heard about him in the show, he was asking a female employee to unbutton her blouse a little bit lower.
Right.
I had not heard those kind of stories about him. But, I mean, famously, the divorces, cantankerous personality, elitist, all of that stuff is what we've always heard about Jack Kent Cooke. It's just he's our lovable bastard.
Yeah. Although I did read and I've not read the actual book. I bet you've probably even read the book this is based on. No?
No, I have not. The only book I've really read is Phil Jackson's book. And that was after all this.
Okay. So the book that this is based off of, apparently, so you guys remember the cheeseburger scene in the first episode, right? Where, Magic Johnson wants a cheeseburger and Jack Kent Cooke's like, no, we have this like very expensive fish. What do you like? Apparently in the book, which I'm assuming is more accurate to what really happened, it's Jack Kent Cooke who, finally starts screaming, can we get this kid a cheeseburger instead, not Jerry Buss.
They have to have somebody be the villain here.
And Jack Kent Cooke apparently later took Magic Johnson out for pizza, and it's the first time he ever had pizza. The first time Cook ever had pizza at 60-something years old.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably not a fair portrayal. And they haven't even mentioned in the show that Cook ever owned the Redskins. Maybe they do in a later episode.
Not that I've seen yet.
That hasn't come up.
I don't think they really care about him after this. I think this was kind of just like, all right, we're moving on from him.
Yeah, probably so. Because it was really the first episode, and where Buss and Cook were kind of hanging around at all the major events because they were in the middle of a transaction and all of that. And what I didn't realize is that, according to the show at least, the reason for the sale in the first place is that Cook's first divorce, I think it was his first divorce, was really, 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 really expensive, and he needed the money to pay off the ex-wife. And I didn't realize that was why he sold the Lakers.
It was partly
According to the
that,
show, at
and
least.
also from my understanding, and you might know this off the top of your head, there's certain rules about if you own an NFL team, you can, or like the rules about where the other teams you own can be.
It's the NFL has those
Yeah.
rules. Yeah, the NFL doesn't let you have multiple interests, controlling interests in multiple franchises.
Right, right. And he was a minority owner at the time of the Redskins at that point, becoming the majority owner at the same time. So I think the divorce and that also play into it, into why he had to sell the Lakers. And he also, they don't even mention, he owned the Sacramento, or not Sacramento Kings, the Los Angeles Kings, the hockey team.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Because they all played.
Just think about what kind of owners the Washington Redskins franchise has had. My goodness, it's been George Preston Marshall.
Yes, human garbage.
Avowed racist. Terrible human being, more or less. Jack Ken Cook, eccentric to the extreme.
Right.
And now we have Dan Snyder, who's like Dr. Evil.
Yeah, and they had that one guy in between for like 4 years, between Marshall and Cook.
That's
Bennett,
right. I forgot about him.
Who also, when he sold the Redskins, buys the Orioles, and the Orioles went to the World Series under him. And then he sold them to, the guy who owns them now, who's just terrible. He's the Dan Snyder baseball.
What's interesting about this show is that the Los Angeles Lakers, before the rival Magic Johnson, had routinely been just demolished by the Celtics almost
in the
every year
championship
in
games,
the NBA final. They finally won one. I think 72 is the one they won. But Jack Kent Cook's team wasn't the winner that the Redskins became in the 80s under his leadership. And it was in the show, and certainly in real life, it was Dr. Buss that established the winning culture of the Lakers.
But let's be honest at the same time. Yeah, Buss turned them into a dynasty, but it's not like they were a loser team. We're talking about
no. Yeah. But I mean, they didn't win. They went to the finals several times and lost repeatedly.
Right. It's like the Buffalo Bills of the '90s,
Yeah, of the '60s and '70s, the Lakers were the Bills.
Right.
Yes.
You had Jack Kent Cook knew how to build winning teams, just maybe not championship teams.
Well, he did, though, with Washington. Yeah. So I guess, like I said, I think the betrayal of Cook is probably greatly skewed. I hadn't heard the pizza story.
Yeah, because they cut that stuff out because, again, it makes him seem like a human being.
You got to have a bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So nobody knows anything about that. The Washington Redskins certainly aren't a popular franchise. Everybody's forgotten about it. So let's just make Buss or Cook, the baddie in all ways. And so it's probably not a fair portrayal.
No. I mean, we are talking about a guy who went from being a orphan to one of the richest men in the world.
On the other hand, though, they used his name and likeness. So somebody from his estate consented to this.
Or did they? Because there was a thing where they apparently never went to the NBA and got the okay to use any of the NBA franchise stuff.
Surely they didn't produce a major television show.
You can look it up. HBO kind of forgot to do that at some point.
How is that possible?
Because it's HBO. I don't know, man.
I mean, maybe they didn't get. I mean, but the Cook estate ought to sue them if they didn't get their consent.
Yeah, I would be curious to know what happened. I've actually been trying to get our buddy Rick Snyder to watch it because he was close with Jack Kent Cook. Rick has talked many times about, one-on-one conversations with Cook calling him all hours of the night just to chat. So
Rick was as close as anybody who's just a little reporter.
Right. As far as anybody living right now, Rick probably knew more about Jack Kent Cook than anyone outside his family.
Well, at least in the public eye, yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know if Rick has HBO, so I don't know if you've seen it. Yeah, it's a good show though. I just also love the filmmaking style, how it's kind of got like a 70s vibe to it,
Well, there's a lot of fourth wall stuff, which I think is pretty cool. It's a well-made show.
It's a fun show.
Yeah, it's real fun. It's probably one of the ones. It's kind of weird. It's actually HBO that does this to me. It's one of the shows like Game of Thrones where I will sit there on the Sunday and Euphoria. I do Euphoria sometimes on Sunday as well, but it's the ones where it's like, all right, I'm gonna sit in at 9:00 and I'm gonna make sure that I watch it as soon as it drops. So like that's how I kind of evaluate a show nowadays that does the weekly episodes is can you get me in my seat at the time that the show starts and have me tune in. And luckily there's no
That's a
commercials
rarity
on HBO,
too.
so it makes it easier
Yeah.
too. There's no commercials.
I tried. I watched one episode of Euphoria and I didn't know what the hell I
It's-
was looking at.
It's a high school thing, and it's.
I
I don't even know how it got me sucked in, but I'm
like
here.
Anti-Steve.
Yeah, I don't know how it got me sucked in, but I'm here. So, I'm just here now.
I'll tell you what. The guy that got to play Magic Johnson. I mean, my goodness, the spitting
Yeah,
image. of him.
and one of the actors is actually the son of one of the player he's portraying. If you watch some of the post
Really?
stuff, they go into
I haven't. I
yeah
didn't
yeah.
watch
I
any of the
can't remember
post
off the top of my head who it is, but I was watching or just listening to that passively, and it's like, so what's it like playing your dad? And he's like, well, Dad just wanted me to be, take it easy on me,
Huh.
So like, yeah,
Interesting.
that's kind of wild, man. No, it's a great show. And John C. Reilly, just really one of the most fantastic actors in America, and he's ugly, so no one is ever going to think of him as like a star A-lister.
Jerry Buss was
Yeah,
ugly.
but John C. Reilly, just so talented, very funny, fantastic Broadway man, So anyway,
But as to the Washington Connection, if you guys are watching this looking for beloved Jack Kent Cooke, this is not the show for
Right.
you.
right? It's not Jack Kent Cooke saying he's elated or like running around with a shotgun or something.
No, it's he's the super villain.
Yeah. He's in an ascot for crying out loud. No one has ever been a good guy in an ascot since the 1960s.
Probably not.
All right, guys, I think that should wrap up this week's episode. I'm gonna catch up on some of that winning time. Maybe this weekend.
Wait, last
So,
thing.
we will
Since we
all
talking
talk
about
to you
shows,
next week.
I'll be quick. Real quick. Showtime. The Fight for Uber. Really good show. Again, Showtime. The Fight for Uber. I forgot the subtitle or main title before that, but just look for the Uber show on Showtime. Good watch. Go ahead, start it.
All right, I'm a Lyft guy.
Hey,
All right, we'll talk to you guys next week.
It surprised no one that I immediately